Welcome back to This Week in Film. It's the weekly podcast where we get together and we talk about the movies we've seen over the past 7 days. I'm Nick Panunto, joined as always by Midwest Matt Lauer. Matt, how's it going?
It's going great, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing good. Last week's episode was our commentary track on After Earth, and
I heard that went real well.
yeah. So everyone, sorry, but you didn't get to hear Matt at all during that production. So sorry about that. There was some sort of technical issue that I didn't realize till I was putting the show together.
That's a real shame, too, because I made the most hilarious jokes, and you'll just have to trust me on that.
Yeah. But we'll make up for it this week with a regular episode.
Yay!
Matt, what did you see this week?
I saw 2 movies.
Oh, right.
I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Nice.
And it is nice. Spoiler alert. And I saw Bumblebee.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get to that one. How about you, Nick? What did you see?
I also saw 2 movies, and I decided to go with epics this week. I saw a movie from 1984 called Once Upon a Time in America, and I also saw a movie from 1995 called Braveheart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
I am wondering how that holds up.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, tell me in a little bit.
Yeah. Would you like to go first with
Raiders?
Sure.
we go chronologically. No, that's not true, because you said one of your movies is from, what, 1974?
84.
Oh, okay, so I guess this is the oldest one. All right, so Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is a movie starring Harrison Ford.
Ah, the original Han Solo.
Yes, the one you actually want to see on screen and deserves time in front of a camera.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would imagine everybody has, I guess you can't imagine everybody's seen it, because one of my friend's ex-boyfriends saw it for the first time like last year, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, I think most people have seen it. I will spoil it. And so this is the first in the Indiana Jones trilogy. Some people might say there's a 4th one, but I don't know. When I think about that, there's just a burned out hole in my brain. So I can't imagine that they would have made a 4th one.
Right.
So this is Steven Spielberg directing, George Lucas and another guy writing it. I'm going to assume the other guy did most of the writing because it's good. But anyway, this is also back when Lucas was doing stuff people liked. So, and the plot is that you are introduced to an archaeologist who, he's not like your guy at the museum archaeologist. He's out there kind of like Tomb Raidering it up, although he's the original Tomb Raider. And he's trying to hunt down the Ark of the Covenant, the container of sorts in which the original 10 Commandments are supposed to lie. Mm-hmm. And he's basically racing against this French guy who's also an archaeologist trying to get this thing for the Nazis.
Right.
And Karen Allen is in this, and this is one of my favorite movies.
Indiana Jones is hunting for it on behalf of the U.S. government.
Indiana Jones is hunting for it to get it, to keep it from the Nazis and to get it into a museum. That's one thing that they come back to a lot in the movies, is across the board, is that the difference between Indiana Jones and these other people he competes with is that the other people are either looking for power or they're looking to find these things just to get money and reputation. And he really is just trying to get these things because he wants them to be in museums where, I guess, where people can see them. You see him do a bit of work as a professor. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of a strange scene early on in the movie because he sounds boring as hell. Mm-hmm. And after the scene resolves, you hear him talking to a friend, and you can tell like he's really more interested in doing the adventure stuff. But even though he's boring as hell, he also sounds like, someone who they really enjoy what they're talking about, but it's kind of just within themselves. He doesn't seem like excited talking about it. It's just stuff he knows really well because it's so much of his life. And you've got these students just kind of staring at him, but then some of them are completely enamored. And one of them's got like, I love you written across her eyelids. So she like closes her eyes and flirts with her teacher that way. And it is kind of funny. I'd never noticed this until this go around, that when the students are leaving the class, like, I think there must be 30 students that walk out the door, and all of them are women except for like the last two. He's
the one angry guy who like slams the apple onto his table.
Oh yeah. And so, he's this heartthrob professor too. But anyway, my point is, he doesn't talk much about people getting to see these things. So I don't know if he's excited for museum goers, but he does seem really connected to museums themselves. He does seem to really want any of these artifacts to be in a place where they are revered, or maybe protected. So anyway, so that's really the plot of the movie. He's trying to hunt this thing down. There's a lot of back and forth. It's very much a cat and mouse kind of movie, because whether it's the things that they're after, little trinkets and stuff, maps, things like that help them get to the Ark, or whether it's Karen Allen, he's constantly losing and getting back things. It's a weird mixture of being really good at things and really bad at things, because he's doing all these crazy cool stuff, like moves and clever ways to try to, break out of things and catch up with people and get out of death or danger. But he just always gets caught and has to give things up. And so it's kind of funny that way. Watching it this time around, because I've always just watched these movies and just sat back and enjoyed them. Never paid attention to things for like podcast purposes. This time around, there were a lot of things where I'm like, oh, you know what? This movie is still great. But there are a lot of things in it that if they were in another movie, I'd be like, that's so dumb. And I wouldn't let it get away with it if it wasn't a great movie. But the movie's so damn charming and fun and atmospheric that like the little things just don't matter. It's just that it's so easy to give it a pass. So like at the beginning, Alfred Molina?
Yeah.
Is that the right guy?
Yeah.
He's with Indy before Indy, meets the woman that's going to be with him for the rest of the movie. He's with this guy trying to hunt down this very first artifact, and the guy's like walking right behind him, and he pauses and talks to another guy in the crew, and he pulls a dart out of a tree, and he's like, the poison is still fresh. 3 days. They're following us. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If they shot that tree with a dart 3 days before you got there, how are we figuring that they're behind you, following you? And then there are things like, like just kind of corny lines that probably now would sound really played out, but were probably fun then, where like, Alfred Molina then they get to one part of this building. After Alfred Molina is terrified to go in, they go into this thing. Like 20 seconds later, he's like, oh, there's nothing to fear here. And Indiana Jones is like, that's what scares me. And I'm like, man, this is corny dialogue, but it works so well here.
Yeah. Well, I think it's supposed to be corny.
Yeah.
And because it's supposed to be an homage to like those 1930s adventure serials.
Mm-hmm.
And those are terrible. And but they're like action adventure, you're going on a journey, and And that's what this movie's trying to recapture, and it does perfectly.
Well, and that's the thing. That's what I'm getting at is like movies that try to do this sort of stuff now, they don't capture adventure and they don't capture wonder. So when these things are in there, these corny lines and stuff like that, it falls so much flatter.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking of like the Mummy movies, stuff like that. And there is some paranormal stuff in this movie towards the end. But yeah, it works so well. And as far as like movie making goes, at this point, like Steven Spielberg's name doesn't mean a ton to me. But
you mean like today?
Yeah, yeah. But these movies back then, and I'm not saying he can't come out with something amazing. It doesn't say anything on its own to me if a movie that's coming out now has Steven Spielberg's name on it. But this is where it's perfect, where you can really go, man, that's where this guy knows exactly what he's doing, because the timing on everything. There are shots and scenes that go on a lot longer than they would now, even though movies are super long. But it does so much to set the atmosphere. It does so much to like raise the drama along with John Williams' score in these moments. And they're just little things that are done really well. It's like everything comes together perfectly in each scene to really do exactly what it's trying to do. Like when Belloc, the French archaeologist that's competing with Dr. Jones throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
When they first meet, all he says is something like, there's nothing you can take that I can't. And I think when Indy sees him, he's like, oh, Belloc. And they barely say anything, but it gives you so much background. Mm-hmm. And everything's shot and scored in such a way that you feel, it just feels like you're being completely played by the director. Like he's taking you on a ride and he's just playing you like a fiddle, and it's so much fun. Oh man. There are so many notes because I just jotting down tons of like, sure. This is great, that's great. What's up?
Since you're talking about Belloc, I was going to mention the like the scene with him and Karen Allen where they have like they initiate. What's the word I'm looking for? Introduce. When they introduce Karen Allen's character, she's doing like a drinking contest in some like
it's in her own bar.
Her own bar in Siberia, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And she like drinks this man/woman under the table, literally. and you learn, and then from like right after that scene, she's almost stone cold sober again. And then later in the movie, when she is Belloc's prisoner, she decides to try to get him drunk in order to try to escape.
Yeah. And
the script turns the tables on Karen Allen, where she's drinking this, it's either vodka or wine, and it hits her really hard and she gets like hammered. And she like jokes about it. She's like, this is some pretty strong stuff. And he's like, yeah, I grew up on this. It's my family's label. Like, I make this wine. So like when she starts the drinking thing, you think what's going to happen is she's going to drink him under the table and she's going to escape. When in reality, what they do is they actually bond. They bond to each other. And she just kind of pulls a knife on him, and he's like, I'm going to go, but maybe in the future we'll meet again and we could maybe try this over again. And then the creepy German guy comes in and spoils the moment. But I think that's just brilliant turning the tables on what you expect to happen.
I think that they do that a lot, like mess with your expectations with the, like, you've seen how great they are at things. And now you're going to see them fail. But I never read that scene, including the other day. I've never read that scene as though she's actually drunk. I've always just read it as she's played as though she's drunk, and then she's like, all right, I'm going to leave now, but just didn't realize that the Nazis were standing in the doorway.
Oh, really?
But that's interesting. I'm not going to go watch it right away again. But I've always read it that way. I've always read it as she's playing drunk so she can, trick her way out. And it still plays for me similarly in a way, where I'm like, man, they're doing such a good job of coming up with ways of getting out of situations, but it's always stacked against them.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, anyway, there are lots of examples of that throughout. But I will say, with you bringing that up, Karen Allen in this movie is such a great counterpart to Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
She's tough. She's funny. She's gorgeous, and she's like, and so is he. I mean, I'm watching this movie and I'm like, man, I think I'm in love with Harrison Ford. Jesus, this guy's great looking.
Yeah.
And so she's this perfect counterpart, and she also has lots of moments where things just don't go her way. Like she can handle her own, like with the drinking, and at one point she gets chased by a guy into a house, and he's got a sword, I think, and she's got a pan. And then she knocks him out with the pan.
Yeah.
But then she hides in a basket, and then they're like, oh, there's the monkey on top of the basket. There she is. We found her. And it's like, man, she was doing so well getting away. Nope, not going to work.
Foiled by the monkey.
Yeah, but there are so many shots. I don't think we see enough of this stuff today, where so many shots in this movie that are just done perfectly. And in that scene where you first meet her in her bar, Indiana Jones comes in and you see his shadow on the wall. And then as the fighting goes on, once the Nazis show up and then Indiana Jones shows up and they're all brawling in this bar, like there are some things that are just really cool. Like there's a moment where Indy grabs one guy's, like there's a guy trying to fight with him and he's got a gun in his hand. And then the guy who's kind of running things is like, just shoot them both. And Indiana Jones like takes the guy's arms and shoots for him at the other guy. And you see instead of seeing the guy get shot, you're seeing his shadow on the wall responding to things.
Right.
And on one hand, it probably prevents the movie from getting an R rating to do these things with the action. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, but what a great way to do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cool. Every scene has so much more care than I feel like a lot of movies do now that are supposed to have adventure. And it's, man, I just wish there were more movies that came out that had this like wonder.
I mean, it makes you appreciate Steven Spielberg, I think, a little bit more, especially like back in the day.
Yeah.
Like when he was at the top of his game. Like he's an old man now. And but like when did this come out? 81?
Yeah.
And like 1981, he wasn't even at his peak yet. Like this is like what really drove him to the super top. And it's just like him and George Lucas were doing this as like a fun project. So like it's just awesome how well it all came together. And it makes
go ahead.
It just makes you wish that there were more like that they just made more together while they were both really interested in doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really feels like it's someone's passion project in like completely counter to someone like Tommy Wiseau. It's the passion project of a couple people who are super competent.
Yeah.
Now, so I did notice some things here and there where I was like, well, that's a little strange. And one thing was the ADR. There's a lot of ADR in this movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it is maybe that Karen Allen didn't really project, or if it's just there's a lot of action and stuff, so they're having to record it again later. But it seemed like a lot of the time it kind of interferes with her lines. You can really pick it up there, but it didn't take me out of the movie that much. John Rhys Davies is in this, and I've been hearing a lot of stuff about him saying some like racist stuff.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, no, I think
was it about?
I take this with a grain of salt. Yeah, he's really against hobbits, and I think people of Muslim faith.
Oh,
and I'm just like, man, I'm so sick of politics ruining our entertainment.
Yeah.
But speaking of politics, our president sucks. Back to the podcast. Man, there are just more shots that I wrote about here. I'll share another one here where when Karen Allen and her name's Marion. When Marion is in the basket, when they grab it and they start running away and kind of snatching her, then Indy comes to the end of, like, he's trying to catch up comes to the end of this like alley, and you see his face, and there's a long shot that you just wouldn't have now of him just looking around like, oh no.
Yeah.
And what I remembered happening, what I was expecting was a shot that completely backs up and just goes, look at all these baskets he's looking at. But it's not shot quite that way. You see him go, oh no, and you're really there with him. And then he's already rushing forward into the sea of baskets. And it's just cool. And most of the cool part is just seeing his reaction and taking the time to do that. Because if I were seeing that movie for the first time, I'd be like, oh my God, what is he looking at? What happened? Is she dead? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then it is followed by one of those forgivable scenes again where she's supposedly on a truck that tips over and then explodes.
Right, yeah.
Like the front door gets shot twice and the truck tips over and just explodes for no reason.
Yeah. Did they even explain how she gets out of the truck?
No.
Because I was watching this movie with my son maybe a month ago, and we turned it off just as they get to the submarine part.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, well, maybe we'll just skip the ending because you're 6. And but up until that point, he was loving it. He thought it was great. But I'm trying to remember. They don't like you said, they don't show her getting out of the truck at all.
They don't explain it all either. He finds her in a tent.
Yeah,
and
he finds her on accident.
Like, they switched the baskets. That's it. Yeah, that's all. He just says they switched baskets. And again, it's like, oh, I'll forgive that. Speaking of the end, though, when people's faces are melting and shit, there are some pretty dated effects here and there in this movie.
Yeah.
But they also do such a really good job with what they've got. So, like, there's a lot of physical stunt work and whatnot that they make work without any of the, CGI stuff that we have today. And then in that last scene, there are all these ghosts floating around and stuff, and some of them look great. And then there's this, like, ball of fire that I don't know why it's there, and, like, kind of drawn on lightning. But then you got these people's faces melting, and I'm like, that is still awesome.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, what a great movie.
It really is. If you go to Disney World, which I recommend, it's a pretty great place. Get some of those Disney dollars. And
real hot take on Disney World there.
And they still have the Indiana Jones stunt show.
Isn't that Universal?
No, it's Disney.
Okay.
And we were there like 2 years ago, and we went and saw it. It's a really dated experience. If you've ever been to Disney World and saw the stunt show, it's exactly the same as it was like 25 years ago, but it's still really cool to watch.
I did actually get to see that. I've only ever been to Disney World twice, and I'll probably never be there again. But I did see that show, and it was a lot of fun. It's hot.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much fire involved.
Yeah. A lot of fireballs and running and jumping, but like,
you feel it in the audience.
But
it's
like,
great.
Indiana Jones is such a fun character that it's a shame that they only made 3 movies.
It is. I mean, you know what I think better than trying to stretch it out and making a 4th one that would just probably suck.
You know what would be great though is if they made a 4th one and we saw Marion and what she was doing 40 years later.
That would be a great idea.
I don't know. Throw Shia LaBeouf in there and.
Wait, I think we're going off the rails.
Okay.
Yeah, actually. Okay, so dropping the facade for a moment. Do you remember if Karen Allen was any good in that movie?
No, she's terrible. She just looks like she's happy to be working.
Yeah, because I was going to say I've seen her in a couple things here and there, like episodes of Law and Order or something, and I remember going, her acting doesn't seem to be on point. Like, still looks beautiful.
Like her character,
she's aging as well as Diane Lane, but yeah, I felt like her acting was kind of off.
Her character in the 4th one compared to the first one is like 2 completely different people.
I don't really remember. Is she like useless?
She's useless. She's like yelling at her son while he's having a sword fight between two cars. She's like, repose, repose. She just looks really happy to be in a movie again. Whereas in the first one, she's like this tough chick, like you described earlier.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want to mess with her at all. And in this one, she's like, oh, she's someone's mom.
Yeah. I'm never going to watch that again, so I guess it doesn't matter too much from here.
I have terrible news for you. That's what our next commentary track will be.
Shut your face. That's all I got right now on Raiders of the Lost Ark. And by the way, that is the title, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So when you see it on Netflix and it says Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, that's not true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
anyway.
In my digital collection of movies, I have it listed as Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark just so I can find it quickly with the other two. And so there's that. It's just for ease of finding. Like the first Star Wars movie is supposed to be called Star Wars, but they changed it later to be A New Hope, or Episode 4, A New Hope. But
I actually just learned that like last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, George Lucas is a disaster.
Monster, yeah.
He did make a few good things.
True.
All right. So is that all about Indy?
Yeah. Just if you've never seen it, I honestly don't think that it's sort of movie that you could only enjoy nostalgically. I think you can completely enjoy it today. So I recommend it to everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, now on to a movie that people probably, I'm going to talk about Once Upon a Time in America. And this is a movie directed by Sergio Leone, who directed the Clint Eastwood Fistful of Dollar movies, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, for a few dollars more. And this is a movie that takes place in America during like three different eras. Turn of the 20th century, like Prohibition era, and then in the late 1960s, I guess. The 1960s or 70s, I'm not really sure. Stars Robert De Niro, James Woods, Elizabeth McGovern. Joe Pesci is in the movie for like 5 seconds. Burt Young is in it for 5 seconds too. He dies violently. Spoiler alert. I'm going to spoil the hell out of this movie. No one has seen this. It's excellent. It's really, really good, but it's also really, really long. Like it's 4 hours long. And it was initially, when the movie was first made, this is just some trivia. When it was first made, the American distributors were like, there's no way we're going to show this 4 hour long movie. So they cut the 4 hour movie down to 2 hours and released it in America, where it was like universally panned as being an incoherent mess. But the international version of it was highly regarded. Roger Ebert actually wrote a review where he was like, he saw it at the Cannes Film Festival in the 80s, and he was like, this movie was amazing. It's not the same movie that is being played in America. You're all being robbed of an experience. So that's why this movie isn't held in as high a regard as like The Godfather and stuff, is because the American distributors destroyed its theatrical run. And then only in the afterthought, when it became available on home video, were you able to see the true vision of the movie, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
I wasn't sure if you were still there.
Some of what you're saying sounds vaguely familiar. I think I have heard about the different versions of it before. So like I'm not familiar with the movie, but I must have heard a review or something of it at some point, because that's all sounding very familiar. But I really have nothing to add. I'm just kind of
sure.
Oh, okay. Let me hear about it and see whether it's worth putting 4 hours of my time into.
I would say it is. I'd say it's definitely worth watching. It's really good. It's really deliberate. It's a little self-indulgent. It feels a little bit like modern Quentin Tarantino, where he's like I said with The Hateful Eight, where it's like you could have made this shorter, but I see why you didn't. Like everything that's in the movie makes sense. Like it's not just in there for the sake of being in there, but it is really long. Like it feels 4 hours long, and that's not a negative. I'm just it's really like when I was watching this movie 2 hours into it, I hit pause because I was like, how much longer is there left? And there was 2 more hours left. So basically the plot of the movie, Robert De Niro is your main character, and he plays a character named Noodles, and he's like in the Bronx. Is it the Bronx? It says Lower East Side of Manhattan. I don't know what Manhattan looks like. Or the areas. Let's say the Bronx, but he's in like the Jewish section of the Bronx, and he is slowly being indoctrinated into a life of crime. Like it starts off with him as a kid, and so let me take a step back. So De Niro's the main character, and I want to say that this movie is a perfect example of a main character who is a protagonist. Where De Niro's character is not a good guy. He's not a good guy at all. He's a horrible, horrible person. And you follow along the story, just to see like what happens to him. We're like, he's the protagonist of a story. So he's the one who advances the story. And there are antagonists that, come across him, along the way. And he's a really bad guy. Like, I mean, spoiler alert, he rapes 2 women on camera, and and they're pretty violent. One of the rapes, the girl seems like she's really into it. But like, you're not sure, because she shows up again later and she's like, oh yeah, I remember you. And he's like, yeah, I remember you too. And, but then like he rapes this other girl, and it is violent, it is horrible, and it is disgusting. And like when he finishes, he does it inside a cab, and when he gets out, the cab driver like speeds away, and like he kind of like dusts himself off, and he's like, well, I'm not happy that I did that. And then he just goes along his way, like he's done. He's like done with her. But like, getting back to the plot. So the movie takes place in those 3 different time periods, and it tells its story in flashbacks. Mm-hmm. And so it jumps to like 1964, back to 1917 or 1910 or whatever, and then 1933, and it basically tells the story of how him and his friends become huge crime figures. And I don't really have too much to say about it. It's a really long story, and it's really well told. It's really well shot. Like, you really feel like you're in all of these different time periods. It does have a very young Jennifer Connelly. She's got to be like 10 years old in this movie. And so I was like, oh, neat, Jennifer Connelly. She has been around forever. Because every time you see Jennifer Connelly, you're like, oh man, she was in a movie that far back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so him and his friends create like this crime syndicate, and then the movie kind of falls apart at the end a little bit. Like the ending of the movie is really left up to your own interpretation, and a bunch of other stuff.
Is it disappointing?
I don't want to say it's disappointing, but it's very, not abstract, but very, like, the movie doesn't tell you what happens, so you have to like guess, where you're like, did that happen, or doesn't it happen?
I don't mind the ambiguity, but that sounds like after 4 hours of investment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the movie starts off with like a 3-minute sequence of a phone ringing, to the point where you're like, is there something wrong with the audio track for this movie? Or I'm not kidding, for like 3 minutes, and it's like over a sequence of like flashbacks and flash forwards, where the phone is just ringing and it's loud. and you're just seeing scenes from the movie that you're going to see later, and it all makes sense after you've seen it. The other thing about the movie is that Robert De Niro's character is an opium smoker. He goes to these opium dens. And one thing that I read about the movie after I finished it is that some people consider the whole movie to be an opium dream, that like none of this actually happened. He just kind of dreamt it up while he was high.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's a lot of there's a lot of ambiguity in it like that, but not in a bad way. Like it just kind of makes you think about it a little deeper. Things really start falling apart in the movie, though. Like you could tell they didn't really know how to wrap it up, because James Woods plays Robert De Niro's best friend, and then like for some reason, they've been friends for like 30 years at this point, and then Robert De Niro says, like, James Woods has this plan, and Robert De Niro's like, oh, you're just crazy. And James Woods like, I'm not crazy. Don't ever call me crazy. Don't ever call me crazy again. And you're like, where is this coming from? like it feels like that's something that like when they were kids that they should have said to each other. And then James Woods reacts violently to it then, because like, go ahead.
Like something to have some meaning to it.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And so then like another 5 minutes goes by and Robert De Niro's like, you really are crazy. And James Woods beats the shit out of Robert De Niro. And you're like, I guess he really doesn't like to be called crazy, but this is like a new character trait. And
that's hard to believe. I'm pretty sure that Robert De Niro would wipe the floor with James Woods.
I don't know. James Woods is like a lunatic.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. I think I've just seen Robert De Niro being tough too much in the past. I haven't watched any of his grandpa movies. Everyone's pretty much saying he's phoning it in at this point, so I don't mess with him. I like his political commentary though. He hates the president.
I like his Robert Mueller on SNL.
Oh, I don't watch SNL. I didn't know that Robert De Niro was ever on it.
Yeah, he does the well, like, you know how have you seen any of the sequences where or the scenes where Matt Damon plays Brett Kavanaugh?
I saw one.
Yeah, those are good, and Robert De Niro plays the Robert Mueller character.
Huh.
But back to the movie, and so like you're talking about violence. The movie is like crazy violent. That it shows sequences of children getting shot and like dying in the arms of other people. There's like, because when they first start out, they're these kids and they're basically doing jobs for a local hood, and the bad guy, like, he says, go I'll make a deal with you guys. You go down to the newspaper guy who's not paying me protection money, and you burn down his newsstand. And you're like, okay, these kids are going to burn down a newsstand, and they do. They totally do. And then they're like, all right, great. And so then when they go to get paid, the guy says, I'll tell you what, I'll give each of you $1, or you can rob one of the guys in my bar. And so they decide to rob one of the guys in the bar, and you're like, oh, so these kids are like pretty bad kids, like, already. It's not like they're just doing this stuff to begin with. They've been doing these bad things for a while. And then one of the kids is like, how about we stop taking orders from that big guy whose name's Bugsy, I want to say. And they start off on their own campaign, and then Bugsy finds out, and Bugsy hunts down young James Woods and young Robert De Niro. And there's the sequence where this one guy puts on these brass knuckles, and while he's putting on the brass knuckles, it's winter, so he's like wearing gloves, and he's like, pardon the gloves, and he just like cracks this kid across the face with brass knuckles, and you're like, oh my God, holy crap. I've never wanted to be hit with brass knuckles, one, and
That
two.
would be strange if you did.
Yeah, and two, I've never seen it delivered so powerfully in a movie. Like, it's just like this quick scene, and like this one moment where he, like, this like light moment of levity where he like says, sorry about the gloves. It like it's cold out, you understand. And then he just like cracks him in the jaw. Meanwhile, Robert De Niro's character is getting like strangled with a chain up the alley. And this is all to just teach them a lesson to not they don't get to do their own thing. They take orders from Bugsy or they die. And so like that's how the movie goes. Like it moves on from there. But it's a very powerful movie. It's very, very well done. A lot of great acting. And it's a shame that the US release of it was so butchered, because the music in it is outstanding. The acting is great. The direction of it is terrific. And so because it did so poorly in the United States, it wasn't up for any kind of awards. Like, it was almost universally panned as a bad movie. So like, it didn't get nominated for anything, and it's been largely forgotten.
Does it have like a Godfather feel to it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as it's like it's Godfather in the sense that it's crime related.
Well, I really mean the feel, like, as opposed to something like Scarface.
Yeah. Well, if I'm answering your question the way I think you're looking for, like when you're in the past, you feel like you're in the past. Like The Godfather takes place in like the 30s or just after World War II, so the 40s, and you really feel like you're in the 40s while you're watching it. And this movie is the same way. Like all the different time periods, you feel like you're there. It doesn't glamorize crime like The Godfather does. Like, it really shows how dirty and disgusting and difficult that kind of a life is. Whereas The Godfather,
it's not corny and shitty like Scarface.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
that's what I'm wondering about. Like, is it good? Like,
yeah, no, it's good.
okay.
Now, I like Scarface too, but I know what you're saying about Scarface. Scarface is kind of terrible.
It's over the top.
Yeah. I don't know why Scarface is held with such high regard by some people.
Yeah, I don't either.
But, you know,
truth be told, I'm not really a fan of The Godfather, but I know it's not because of it that it's lacking in quality. It just didn't strike me the right way. But I also saw The Godfather, if I'm remembering right. This is like in high school. I think I saw a version of it because I just sat down and watched all three of them with a friend, and who said I needed, kind of insisted that I watch it. But I think, oh man, I think that what we watched was a version that was edited so that nothing was in flashback.
Right. Yeah, that exists.
Like, it just went chronologically. So I may not have gotten the experience that people get when they see the director's vision.
Mm-hmm. Tony on one of our first few episodes of this show that you're listening to talks about that version of The Godfather. I think it's called The Godfather Saga, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the end.
Okay. So what have we got left? We got Bumblebee and whatever the other thing was that you watched. 1994's movie.
95's Braveheart. I'll go right into that because we'll save
Cool.
Bumblebee for the end.
All right. And I've seen Braveheart.
Oh, right. Braveheart is excellent. It is a damn good movie. And last night, my wife and I were watching, and this is a spoiler for the next episode, my wife and I started watching Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Oh, good God, why?
Because I hate myself.
Okay, that makes sense. Or record.
Yeah, so we're back.
So I wasn't saying that Nick should hate himself. What I was saying was that is a reason, maybe the only reason, to force yourself to watch Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yeah, that movie, spoiler alert,
Sucks.
next week's episode is really, really bad.
Yeah.
And this movie I thought was made in 1998 because I made a remark to my wife saying, because there's these sequences of battle in Prince of Thieves, and I'm like, this movie is 4 years before Braveheart, which has some of the best fighting sequences I think ever. Like, as far as like war
Mm-hmm.
horse
battle sequences.
battles. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. And so like the difference between the two, and they're only 4 years apart instead of 7, like I thought, is even greater.
Yeah.
So anyway, Braveheart, if you're unaware, is the story of Mel Gibson and his quest. It's the story of William Wallace, who's this Scottish guy who leads a revolt against the King of England in order to free Scotland from England's tyrannical designs. It's great. It's really good. It has excellent music. It is a lot of fun. The chief complaint that I have about this movie is Mel Gibson himself. And it's not Mel Gibson's fault. I think Mel Gibson does a good job, but I think he's supposed to be a much younger character than Mel Gibson is. Like, Mel Gibson is just too old to play the character of William Wallace. Like, I think it's supposed to be like a young man in his like early or mid 20s, and Mel Gibson plays him in that fashion. Like he acts like he's a young man in his 20s in love at the beginning, and then like the way he reacts is like a young man who's just lost his love and things like that. And he looks like he's someone who's pushing 45, and it kind of distracts you, or detach. No, that's not the right word. Christ, I can't talk today.
Kind of takes you out of it
a little bit, but it's I can't blame Mel Gibson for being too old for a movie.
Well, yeah, but he put himself in the part.
Exactly.
So I think he can.
He cast himself. Now I think he does a great job, but I wish we had young Mel Gibson to be in the movie. But other than that, the acting in this movie is outstanding. It's I don't know anyone else in this movie, like except for Brian Cox, and Sophie Marceau. But so Mel Gibson is William Wallace. He leads this revolt against England, like I said, and he has the goal of freeing Scotland from England, which, spoiler alert for the end of the movie, if you haven't seen Braveheart, he dies. And at the end, the next battle is with Robert the Bruce is like been crowned the new king of Scotland, and they're like lining up so that he can pay homage to the king of England. And Robert the Bruce says, "You fought for Wallace. Will you fight for me?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, I guess so. Sure. What else are we going to do but die today?" And Mel Gibson has this voiceover. He's like, "The people of Scotland fought for their freedom and they won." And you're like, did they? Because isn't Scotland still a part of England? Like, to this day.
I mean, it's its own country.
Is it? Because I feel like it's still part of the United Kingdom. Because didn't they have like a vote like just a couple years ago, like for Scotland to
Brexit?
No, like Scotland was gonna, like, they had like a nationwide vote to.
Oh man, okay. Well, you're gonna ask me to betray my own ignorance here, but I don't. I don't know exactly what the system of the United Kingdom is. You know, like I don't think that Britain like owns it. But I don't know exactly how the United Kingdom actually works. Scotland's its own country. I'm pretty confident about that. And if I'm wrong,
hang on. Let's ask. I'm going to ask.
Let me know how dumb I am.
Turn on.
But
research.
I do. While you're looking that up, I'll posit something at you because I don't remember this movie that well. I do remember thinking it was good. I know it was long. It took up 2 VCR tapes. But what I do remember was the all the preparation for it. Because back in the day, for those of you who are quite a bit younger than us, you might not remember this, but back in the day, people really had to push movies more because there wasn't there wasn't internet to tell you about things and sell you on Instagram and things like that ahead of time. So there would be not exposés, that's not the right word, but stuff on shows to go like, hey, this movie coming up, let's talk about how it was made and blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
And I remember there being a lot before that movie came out, making it sound like it was telling this story that's never been told and kind of giving it the sense of being legitimate and accurate. But to my knowledge, this movie is things I've heard since then. I obviously am not an expert on Scotland, but I've heard a lot since. Not at all.
Okay.
But I've heard a lot since about how just completely inaccurate and kind of bastardized this story was. As it was made to fit in the movie. But do you remember that? Do you remember like the marketing and stuff for this movie?
I remember like a lot of Mel Gibson movies had like a ton of that. I know what you're saying, like exposés, but not exposés. Like a lot of like those HBO first looks for it and just stuff specials. Like that. Yeah. And like, for instance, for the most part, I just remember not so much this movie, but the movie Maverick. Like, I remember there being so much stuff for the movie Maverick.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I can picture Jodie Foster and Mel Gibson still standing there or sitting there talking about Maverick and how much fun they had making Maverick. But
I'm glad someone had fun with it because I saw it in the theater and I didn't have fun watching it.
Maverick?
Yeah.
Oh, they had a great time. They made a lot of money.
Good for them.
And I'm looking at this internet article right now from The Guardian, and it says, the question is Scotland a nation or a country? And I didn't know there was a difference between the two words. And
I didn't either.
It says the United Kingdom of Britain and Northern Ireland is the official title of the state. Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England are often called the home nations. All of them can be described as countries or nations, as can the UK in its entirety. None of them are independent states, however. So that doesn't answer my question at all, really.
So does Brexit take Scotland out of the European Union too?
I think it does, because it's the United Kingdom that's leaving. Or is it just Britain? So,
oh my God. So our British listeners, I'm sure there are none of you, but still, if we've got one, let us know what you think.
Please explain
Please explain your country and the other countries that are nations that are not part of your country.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Maybe if you live in Scotland, you could explain it to us too.
All right.
So the other thing that I wanted to point out about this movie is I think it's like one of the last great epic movies to not have like CGI, like a lot of computer generated stuff. And it really adds a lot of weight to the battle sequences. Like when there's like a field of people running towards each other on horseback or on foot, and
you feel it.
You can really feel it. Like the people that are way far back in the distance, out of focus, feel just as real as the people who are in focus in the foreground. And I was like, while you're watching it, you're like, oh man, it's a shame that like today's epic movies, like they have like 30 real people and the rest are all computer generated images, because it really, like we said, it adds a lot of weight and gravity to the scene that you're watching. And then you also have to think about like when they were making the movie, like all of the costuming that they had to do to make it. Like everybody that's there had to wear like terrible peasant clothes and stuff. So all of those, every costume for every character had to be created. And then like for the English armies who are like well equipped, they had like armor and armor and weaponry. So like all of that stuff had to be made and applied, and it all looks real. It all feels real. And I feel like this is the last movie that really had that. Like I can't think of anything past it, because the next movie that I think of that was real big like Braveheart is Gladiator, which was like I think 2000 or 2001, and most of that movie is CGI. I think.
I think that's one reason that those things. Well, maybe it's not. The reason was marketing, but that was one of the focuses that a lot of those specials had. Were how did they make this? And I know that was the case with Braveheart because I remember seeing like scenes of like all these fake horses on a big rack, like this giant rack, and it looked ridiculous from when you're not watching the movie because it's like half a horse. Just shifting forward and like just moving robotically almost.
Right.
And then in the movie, you're like, man, how did they stab that horse without it dying?
Right. Yeah.
But that's what a lot of those specials were about. Like, and Disney movies would be like, here's how we animated things.
Yeah. I remember seeing something in one of those specials about the making of Braveheart where like the only computer stuff that they did was to digitally remove like
a car.
Yeah. Like a car or power lines.
Mm-hmm.
In the distance
background
and stuff, but like for the most part, everything's real, which is really cool. I like it a lot. I know that the story for this movie is totally, like you said, totally bastardized and like just made up to make Mel Gibson's character be like the greatest guy ever. I don't care. It's still
as a movie.
It's still good. And the violence is really violent. So yeah, Braveheart. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's quite a work of art. I think Mel Gibson is a terrific filmmaker. He directed this as well. I never saw The Passion of the Christ. I don't really intend to, but I'm sure it's a well-made movie. But have you ever seen Apocalypto?
No.
You should watch that. That movie is really, really good. It's really good.
I'll consider it.
Yeah. Apocalypto is an amazing movie. And it
how long is that?
It's probably 2.5 hours. Okay. But it's all told from the perspective of it's like the story of the Mayans, I guess. And it's another like hyper violent movie, but it takes place before the Spanish arrive in South America. And it's told in like they speak Mayan or whatever. And I'm guessing that it's Mayan. I could be wrong about the culture, but they end up at the Mayans at least. And it's really good. And Mel Gibson is just a phenomenal filmmaker. It's really a shame that he went crazy.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that actually, because one thing that I don't think I've seen much of is stuff that, and I don't mean this as a joke, but like stuff that we learned about in like 5th grade history class, where we're talking about Aztecs and Incas and Mayans, and none of that's ever been fleshed out in movies that I've ever seen. So, and I know reading about it when I was a kid, like history was not my jam. I couldn't retain information. I remember getting Fs on history tests. And so getting to see stuff, I mean, I would imagine it's probably not completely accurate or anything, but it would be nice to see some of that stuff that was so just dry on the page, fleshed out in a movie.
Yeah, it's well worth the trip. Like just talking about it makes me want to watch it again.
I will check that.
You have to watch it with subtitles because it's told in a foreign language. But it's quite good.
Okay.
But yeah, Braveheart also very good. And I believe that it was Mel Gibson's directorial debut, and it ended up winning Best Picture that year. So good for him. The end.
All right. Well, then I guess we're moving on to Bumblebee.
Bumblebee.
And that means there's a preview corner.
Oh, boy. Oh, and it's brought to you by The Big Ticket.
Yeah. We're only an hour into this episode, so why not? So, first preview, Dragons 3. I've already talked about it before. Didn't realize the guy was missing a leg. I would like to see that scene because I think it would be hilarious to see a DreamWorks movie where a guy's leg's getting ripped off. I realized while watching this preview that I'm really, like inspirational epic music makes me want to throw up at this point. Like it's preview corner's getting to be a pretty painful experience for me. I didn't realize how much more I'm seeing movies in the theater right now that are not horror movies, because I've just been hearing lots of inspirational music. Lego Movie, saw a preview for that again. I did actually kind of laugh. Like there's a moment where a star is being pinched in a door, and he's like, "Oh, it hurts so much," and I'm like, "This is making me laugh." I made me wonder if the Beastie Boys knew when they were making music that they were making music for movie previews. And I think it's kind of their thing. Like if they didn't know it, they should start making music again if they're not already, and do that. I think one of them might have passed away, but I might be making that up too.
I forget which one.
Well, sorry, guy from the Beastie Boys. Moment of silence. You're not supposed to laugh during silence. So moving on, I saw another preview for The Kid Who Would Be King. And each time I see an ad for this, I kind of, like I had said the first time I saw a preview for it, that it looked like fun and like something that where I'd have a kid and keep it, I would take it to it. And this, when I see another commercial for it, I'm like, I bet I'm going to see this and go, no, that looks like crap. But each time, in spite of that expectation, I still come around to like, no, that looks like fun. It looks kind of like what the Narnia movies should have been. So I don't know. Maybe it's going to suck. I don't know. I'm probably not going to go to the theater to see it or anything. But if I had kids, I think I would still go. Yeah, let's go see that. Captain Marvel, saw another preview for that. And the previews for this movie are just not doing anything for me.
No,
they don't. No, I mean, I guess I could try to put it into more words, but her punching an old lady is a little unusual. But other than that, I'm like, this isn't saying anything to me at all. It's like Sam Jackson's like, oh, so you're this part of this thing, and I might be superheroed out. I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care at all. Like, and I'll go see it, I think, but the preview is not going to be any purpose for that, because there's nothing that says this is an interesting plot or story. And I hate to admit it, but at this point, my interest in going to see it is that I actually feel like Marvel makes pretty good movies. So I'll probably see it, but the preview sucks. There's a movie called Rocket Man. It's about Elton John. Didn't know that was a thing.
That's a thing? I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, and here's the thought that occurred to me while I was watching the preview for it. I'm here to see Bumblebee. So I'm not sure who made the connection there. Well, people who are here to see this off-brand Transformers movie, maybe they want to see a movie about Elton John's life. And then there's a preview for a cartoon called Wonder Park that at first looked like a Toy Story ripoff. And then it looked like it might not be a Toy Story ripoff. And then the tone kind of came back, and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure that's a Toy Story ripoff. So some kid's imagination turns into an actual theme park. And the creatures that were in her mind now are sentient, I guess. So that was that. Preview corner.
Okay.
Nothing too exciting.
Brought to you by The Big Ticket.
Yeah, sorry, Big Ticket.
I think he's got one. I think he's got one more week before his money runs out for the sponsorship.
Yeah.
If you go to our page,
send us something else, Big Ticket. We're holding Preview Corner hostage.
If you go to our Patreon page.
Down.
For $5, you can sponsor a corner, and Kevin gave us a $25 gift card, so that's worth 5 weeks.
I think that earns him 5 months. $5 a week. I don't know if you Patreon anything, but I follow a couple things on Patreon. $5 a week's pretty steep.
Is it?
And I don't know that we're quite there with our production quality.
Well, no one has been to our Patreon page yet, so you know.
All right, so Bumblebee. So I had mentioned before that I wish I could want to see this movie because I wish I could pretend the other Transformers movies never happened. The first 4 minutes of this movie, I mean, almost instantly, actually, the first 4 minutes of this movie are perfect. Literally 10 seconds into this movie, I totally forgot those other movies existed.
Really?
Like, I just was fucking smiling from ear to ear. I was so into it. And the rest of the movie does not live up to the first 4 minutes.
Oh, no.
But it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just that, seriously, first 4 minutes are everything you want a Transformers movie to be. It's perfect. There were characters showing up on screen that I haven't seen since I was like 8.
Uh-huh.
Would not have, if you were to say to me, hey, draw some of the characters, I would have drawn like 3 or 4.
Uh-huh.
But I'm seeing them and I'm recognizing them, and it's reminding me of, oh yeah, this guy, Cliff Jumper's a character, Shockwave's a character. And some of these may have been in the other movies, but they just didn't look like themselves, so it didn't matter.
Uh-huh.
It's fucking perfect. Like, I want to go back just to watch that scene again. And if it cost me $5, it might be worth it. Like, seriously,
Really?
it's so Nick, you gotta go just to see that.
But don't show up late.
No. If you miss the first few minutes, you're gonna have a cute robot movie, because that's what it goes into after that. And to be honest with you, it's fine. It's really just fine after that. So the first few minutes you're on Megatron. No, that's the bad guy. Cybertron. Yeah. And you're seeing this battle go on. And so the plot of the movie is Bumblebee is sent to Earth to try to establish a safety base. And that's it. That's the plot of the movie. Like, and once he gets there, some Decepticons try to hunt him down to stop that from happening, and to find out where Optimus Prime is. That's it. Now, if I were to try to describe the plot of any of the other Transformers movie, I'd be talking for a half hour and not know what the hell I'm even saying.
Right.
This movie is simple. It knows what it is. Like the other movies, I don't think they're complex in that they're intelligent or anything. They're just fucking all over the place.
Right.
This movie knows what it is, and it's basically, I think a lot of people compare it to E.T., and I've only ever seen E.T. once, and I was young, so I imagine that's pretty apt.
Make sure the version you see the FBI have guns and not walkie-talkies.
Right. But this is, it turns into a cute robot movie where Haley Steinfeld, who is actually a likable character. And you're not getting like camera shots up her crotch and stuff because it's not Michael Bay making weird porn like.
Well, how am I supposed to know she's attractive?
Because she's got a nice smile. I don't know. Actually, that's kind of a funny joke because they're in there. This movie's funny. It's not hilarious, but there are jokes that make you laugh. And not everyone's likable. Her mom and her stepdad are kind of annoying, but it's not like the other Transformers movies where the parents are, like disgusting.
So, not to interrupt you, but Haley Steinfeld's the girl from True Grit.
Right.
I just looked at her IMDb. I was like, oh, right.
Yeah. And apparently she's a pop star now, too. I didn't know she was making music, but apparently she's like in the top 40s. But there's a little bit of disconnect here and there. Like there are moments where it feels a little bit like maybe she's looking at a golf ball or a tennis ball at the end of a stick. But it doesn't matter. Like in spite of that, it's still like she and Bumblebee have perfectly fine chemistry. Don't go to the movie expecting to see lots of action.
Yeah.
It's a lot more like a girl and her friend. Like it's kind of like, her dad's passed away and Bumblebee is her puppy. And like, so you're just seeing these two characters become friends, and it works all right. And there's John Cena's in it as kind of a military guy who knows what's going on, and well, to the degree that he's trying to hunt down this giant robot that might be killing people.
Yeah.
And he's fine. I haven't really seen him in much. I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything, actually, but he's fine. He's just fine in it. And none of these characters, like the military characters, they're kind of goofy and stuff, but it's just not a Michael Bay movie. People are not gross. They're not just super annoying. You're not watching any dogs hump.
Does that happen in a Transformers movie?
It does. Yeah, and so honestly, like I walked out of this movie, and this is one thing I would not have expected. I walked out of this movie wanting a Transformers movie. Like if they were to say, okay, there's going to be Bumblebee 2 and then Transformers, and it's going to be this design and stuff, I would be totally there. And if they were just to jump right to that, I'd be fine with that too. You see Optimus Prime looking like Optimus Prime. There's a shot at the end of the movie where you're like, oh man, that's what that should look like. It's just, I don't want to oversell this movie because I'm not saying it's like a A+ quality, but as far as wanting a Transformers movie to fix what all went wrong before, this was a good way to erase that. And I have heard that they are planning that if they make more movies, they are going to follow this design. So I'm pretty excited to hear that because there are a couple things, some hints dropped here and there that sort of connect it to the other movies, but it also in a ton of ways destroys whatever continuity there was. But I'm pretty sure the other 5.5 movies did that anyway.
Right.
This is an 80s movie. Really, at heart, there's 80s music. It feels like an 80s movie. It's kind of got 80s sensibilities. There are some references that feel a little bit forced to go like, hey, look at this. They're eating Mr. T cereal.
I remember Mr. T cereal.
But it works. I would give this movie probably a B-, but totally watchable. The first few minutes are great, and then if you're watching it with your kid, you're probably you're gonna have a fun movie. There's not really any blood. It is PG-13. I don't know why. Could totally be PG. You will see one character just sawn in half, so that might be a little alarming for a kid. But otherwise, it's cool. Go, to check it out. And it's weird, but I saw someone say, making some commentary about it. They were like, go see this movie so that some money goes into the new kind of Transformers, just so that people don't walk away thinking like, oh, this didn't do as well, so the Michael Bay movies were better or something. And I'm like, I kind of want to agree and like petition for people to go see this movie so that
they make better ones.
Yeah. Hopefully it's doing really well internationally because I know it's not doing great in America. I'm
looking at the numbers right now. It had a budget of $135 million.
Which is pretty low for a Transformers movie.
Yeah. Its gross for the U.S. is $101 million. But worldwide it's at $309 million. So that's pretty good.
And I mean, as far as like marketing goes, I didn't get the sense that they were beating us over the head with it.
Yeah, they definitely weren't going all in like they do for all the other Transformers movies. I didn't even know it was coming out until like a week or two ago, like when it was coming out. I was like, oh, I thought this was like a summer movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's coming out in January. Well, I guess maybe at the end of December, but still. Yeah.
So, all right.
It totally could be a summer movie. They should have released it in the summer.
Well, then that brings us, I guess are you done?
Yeah, I don't think that, there's nothing really else for me to say. Go see it.
Well, that brings us to our new super popular segment on the show, our movie ranking list.
Oh, man.
All right. And we have to do some some back work. We have to place After Earth on our list. from our commentary track last week. We have to put it on our list somewhere. We sure. Well, I spent the time watching it.
That's true. So did I.
Yeah.
You don't know what I think. You will in a second.
Matt, where would you put After Earth?
On my list, I would put After Earth above Contagion and under House Shark.
What? Are you serious?
I mean, personally, it's kind of tied with Contagion for me.
Oh my god!
But if I were to measure this by how much I enjoyed watching it, then it's definitely going above Contagion. I was hanging out with you. We were watching it.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
It was fun to make fun of. It didn't feel nearly as long as I expected.
It did kind of fly by, yeah.
Yeah, I was expecting it to feel like it was 3 hours long. It didn't.
Yeah. I mean, for the amount of times that kid sleeps during the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so then let's see. Okay. What was the first movie you saw? Oh yeah, where would you put Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I would put Raiders of the Lost Ark at my number 2 slot.
In your number 2. Oh, so we were given some feedback that people want to know at what number people are putting out on these lists. So you put
okay, so Raiders of the Lost Ark is now my number 2 movie.
Right. And After Earth went in at the number 12 slot.
Well, it's about to be 13.
That's true. Let's see. Enter Raiders of the Lost Ark. Week 97. All right. Wait, no, this is week 98. 97 was last week. All right. And then where would you put Bumblebee?
I'm having a hard time figuring out whether it goes below or above. As above, so below. Sorry, that's a bit of a tongue twister. I'm gonna put it above it, actually.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, Bumblebee is now my 4th favorite movie ever.
Wow. Bumblebee. Week 98. So that's at number 4.
Yeah. Wow.
That moves Aquaman all the way down to number 17.
Yeah. Fucking.
All right.
You know what? I keep even the Your Movie Sucks review of Aquaman was like, yeah, this was cheesy fun.
What? No.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Exactly. No, it was long and boring and terrible.
Yeah.
It wishes it was a fun parody, but it was crap.
Yeah, it wants to be a fun movie, but it wasn't.
Right.
All right. My turn now.
Yeah.
I'm going to put After Earth below Venom, but above Aquaman at the number 16 slot.
Sounds right.
What did we say that was week 97?
Yeah.
Week 97. And then I'm going to put Once Upon a Time in America. The top of my list is kind of crammed with good stuff here. I'm going to put it above Iron Man 3 into the number 6 slot below Predator. I like Predator more. You're going to have to sit with me while I write out all of these words in America. America.
That was an Eminem song.
Yeah. And then Braveheart. I think I'm going to put Braveheart above Goonies.
My God, really?
Into the number 2 slot.
Oh, God. That means it's going above Predator and other good stuff.
Oh, it's definitely better than Predator.
What was it that you put under Predator? And it hurt to hear you say that.
Iron Man 3?
No, never mind. Maybe it was what you put above Predator.
I put Spider-Verse above Predator. Spider-Verse, I had a lot of trouble deciding where it belonged.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to put Predator above the Goonies, yeah. Yeah,
Wait.
I'm sorry, Braveheart.
I was going to say, you are not allowed to move stuff, because if you are, I got some adjustments to make.
Braveheart is my new number 2 movie at week 98. All right, yeah, so my top 5 now is Apollo 13, Braveheart, Goonies, Infinity War, and Spider-Verse. And Mrs. Claus still sitting at the bottom at number 20. I'm Casey Kasem.
That was a decent Casey Kasem.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, well, this was an extra long episode of the show to
no kidding.
To help make up for not being able to hear you at all on last week's show.
Next week we'll have an episode where it's just me talking to myself.
So yeah, in the future, if we're ever in person, one of us will be on headphones to make sure that the show's being recorded. Because we lost a lot of good stuff there. And I don't know if you can hear my family screaming at each other upstairs, but that's happening. So I have to go because somebody is trying to murder somebody.
All right.
Go
intervene.
If that's, and we're gonna go outside and play in the snow because it snowed on the East Coast today.
Yay!
So if that's the end of the reel, we'll see you next week in film.
Peace out.